Hello everybody, welcome back to Bare Basic Tech. Today we're going to be talking about if, elif, and else statements. So an if statement to start is where a programmer will write a certain conditional statement that if true will then run a certain code underneath it. So the syntax would be the keyword if followed by some kind of a conditional statement that you want to test if it's true or false. And again, this has to be evaluated to some kind of a boolean of true or false. And then it'll end with a colon to indicate the end of your if statement. Underneath the if statement, you would indent and then write whatever code you want it to perform if this conditional statement is true. So an example, let's say we have y equals 1 and x equals 3. In this case, we have a block for if y equals 1, print do stuff 1. Likewise, we have another block for if x is 3, print do stuff 2. So again, to break it down and compare it to the syntax, we have your keyword if, y equals 1 would be your syntax in this first example, and then the colon would be tailing at the end here to indicate the end of the if statement. So if you hit play, it's going to go ahead and run both do stuff 1 and do stuff 2 because both of these if statements are true in this case. Moving on to elif statements. These are used when you only want to fire off one condition in a series of if statements. So the first statement that presents a true condition will be the only one out of all of them that is fired. So all elif statements must then also be preceded by an if statement. So the syntax would be your if statement, as mentioned above, where you'd write that and then it would do whatever you want it to do. And then immediately underneath it, you would have the elif statement with some alternative condition that you want to test after the if statement. So a simple example of this. Start this as 1. So for example, let's say we have x is 1. So first it would test if x is equal to 1. And if it's true, it'll go ahead and print x is 1. Otherwise, if x is less than or equal to 4, print x is less than or equal to 4. Otherwise, if x is less than or equal to 5, print x is less than or equal to 5. So again, in this case, x is 1, so it's going to first see this, and it's going to run this statement. So there you go, x is 1. Now you're probably wondering, well, hold on a sec, because x is also less than or equal to 4 in this case, and it's also less than or equal to 5. So why are these statements not being run? Well, it's because you're using an elif statement, not an if statement. So the elif statement, or else if, is only being run if the preceding statements are also false. So let's say I go ahead and change this, and let's make it a 3. So you're going to see that this statement's no longer true, but this one is. So let's go ahead and run it again. You're going to see x is less than or equal to 4 is now printed out because now this statement is true because the preceding statement is false. And we'll change it even again. Let's make this 5. If we run that, you're going to see that it prints out the final block here. And this is because, in this case, 5 does not equal 1, and it's not less than or equal to 4. So because the statements above this elif are false, and that this condition in the elif is also true, it will go ahead and print the statement that falls underneath it. So how is elif exactly different from if? So to make it clear to you, I went ahead and took this code and copied it and replaced all elif statements with if statements. And the major difference here is that it will run each condition test separately and on its own. So it will run all of these regardless of how many of them are true or false. So for example, if x is 1, it would print the following statement. Less than 4, it'll print this. Less than 5, it'll print this. So if you run it, notice how it prints all 3 statements. And it's because x equals 1 is true for all of these conditions. And because you're using if statements, it will run all 3 of these blocks separately. So just remember that. If, it will always run that condition check. Elif, it will only run it if the conditions above are false and that the conditional that you give with the elif is true. Lastly, we're going to talk about else statements. So these are general statements that are used as last to fire in an if-elif statement stack and more as a default. So these are not mandatory, but they can serve well as a catch-all in case you want to use them for some kind of error checking or input validation. So the syntax is you must have an if statement at a minimum, followed by any other elif statements that you'd like to add after the elif statement. And then lastly, you would have your else statement, which would just be constructed of the else keyword followed by a colon. And then underneath it, like the if and elif, you would just have an indent and then write whatever code you want that else to run. So a simple example to explain how else works. So let's say we set x equals to 1, and then it'll go look at these different condition checks. So it'll start with x equals 1, and then if that's not true, it'll go on and on, right? So in this case, it sees that this is the first thing to be true, so go ahead and fire this off. And then it sees elif and be like, well, nope, hold on, because this was already true, so I don't need to do this. And it stops right there. Let's go ahead, change that to a 4. Now it'll run the second line because, again, it sees that x is no longer equal to 1. However, it is less than or equal to 4. But then let's say it's neither of those conditions, right? Let's say it's something crazy like that. Go ahead and run it, and it's going to go ahead and use no conditionals are true, which was from this block. So again, notice how else doesn't have a condition. Else's condition is that all of the above are just simply false statements, right? So I can type anything in here as long as it doesn't qualify as true for either of these conditional checks. It will go ahead and conduct that action. So that's all I have today, guys. Thank you for watching, and if you liked it, please feel free to like and subscribe. Thank you. Bye.